question. Do I hear the question in Spanish as well? Or do I hear it only in English?
O sea, ¿qué preguntó?
Yeah, okay, great.
Dime, Santiago.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, sometimes I hear something in the background, but now I understand it. Yeah, great.
Santiago, ¿me puedes traducir, por
Great.
favor? Yes. Ok. Sí. Listo. Bueno, ya me sigue preocupando el ingreso a la... lo de YouTube, entonces tú no me dejas, Dani. Sí, claro. Pues normalmente arrancamos a las 6:45. 6:45, 6:50, estamos dando tiempo a que la gente ingrese. Cuando lo hacemos directamente todo en el Zoom, ¿sí?
Jasmine.
Solamente él, Hugo y Daniela y yo podemos proyectar, ¿sí? Solamente, no más. Y ya Hugo
Yeah,
está
I've just shared.
habilitado. Ya Hugo está habilitado para proyectar, para compartir. ¿Sí? Sí, ahí.
Now you
Pantalla
can see my
completa.
screen.
Eso,
Okay.
eso.
Jasmine, cuando
Sí.
personas,
Good, good,
yeah,
good.
how many persons do you think will join? ¿Cuántas personas?
En promedio, por lo general, se unen a la sala directamente en Zoom unas 50, 60 personas, pero en YouTube sí queda toda la grabación completa. Sino que hoy decidimos hacerlo con ingreso restringido a Zoom para evitar que dañen el evento. Es que a veces se han metido personas y nos han
Sabotage.
saboteado, ¿sí?
Okay.
Entonces, por seguridad.
Hello everyone.
Hola,
Federman.
Pedro.
Hola Jasmine. Hi, go.
Hola, Pedro, buenas noches.
Hola Jasmine, ¿cómo estás? Hugo,
Mejorando.
good afternoon. Welcome to Colombia. I am a president of the National College of Pharmaceutical.
Me
I
gusto.
think
Me gusta,
no,
señor.
Bello.
Our idea is to speak in Spanish or English, no problem. Because
Thank
usually
you.
when the people, usually because the people who comes to Colombia, they try speaking Spanish,
Sí,
and the Colombian people try speaking English.
Well, I've promised that if I'm back next year, my
Uh-huh.
Spanish will have improved
Okay. Oh,
because, but it's one of the problems I might discuss
ya
also in
Hugo
this
dice mi nombre en
meeting.
español.
The language barrier isn't facilitating cooperation,
uh-huh.
and that's a pity.
Okay. Okay. This group is usually in the Zoom. Participate maybe 60, 16 or 14, no, 16, 17 persons. And the old people use YouTube channel, normal. Jasmine,
Pues
Jasmine.
con Hugo vamos a estar hasta eso de las 7:45, 8 de la noche.
Sí, señora. Pregunta, ¿ya la gente se puede conectar por el canal de YouTube en la versión de inglés y español, cierto?
Sí, y ya Daniela verificó, me dice que ella se hace cargo de ello.
Sí, se está
Federman,
disponible la Haga clic aquí
Federman,
para comenzar. Dime.
no sé, los compañeros, eh, pues hoy lo hicimos así para evitar que se metieran a sabotearlo y todo el rollo, pero no sé si de todas maneras a ellos les interese tener gente en sala de Zoom, aparte de nosotros.
No, dejémoslo así porque te acuerdas que la vez pasada se nos
Sí,
complicó. Esperemos. Más bien, si hay
sí.
preguntas, tú les dices que por favor las manden y se les comenta que estamos colocando en Zoom básicamente porque hemos tenido situaciones de interferencia. Mm.
Sí, bueno, son las 6:46. ¿Comenzamos o esperamos que se unan más colegas aquí a la sala?
No, ya, ya, porque acuérdate que por YouTube toca ya conectar la gente. Y más bien
Sí.
a todas la bienvenida y esperamos unos momentos y ya se abre el canal YouTube y empezamos. Porque creo
Bueno,
que
señor. Bueno, ya se unió Day. Dani me dice cuando esté lista para YouTube para arrancar, dar la apertura.
Ya está listo YouTube.
hola Carito, muy buenas tardes, bienvenida. Claro,
Soy, hola Ferma,
qué gusto.
¿cómo estás?
Tú estás en vivo y en directo aquí, ¿cuál Zoom?
Ajá.
Ok, thank
Ahora
you.
nos vemos.
¿Arrancamos ya, Dani? Porque no veo que hayas activado grabación y demás.
Estamos en directo en Zoom ya. Y perdón, en YouTube.
Ok. Bueno, muy buenas noches a todos, apreciados colegas. Bienvenidos a su jueves farmacéutico, el evento de formación continuada de la Unidad Regional Valle del Cauca, ya 5 años en esta actividad, donde compartimos saberes, conocimientos y experiencias alrededor del ámbito farmacéutico. Entonces, pues reciban un fraternal saludo del Colegio Nacional de Químicos Farmacéuticos de Colombia. Hoy le doy la palabra a nuestro presidente nacional, Federman Núñez, para que les dé la bienvenida y de paso salude a nuestro conferencista el día de hoy y luego procederé a presentarlo. Federman, adelante.
Bueno, muy buenas noches a todos. Es un gusto estar con ustedes y también comentarles que tuvimos la oportunidad en este jueves farmacéutico de tener a un colega que nos visita desde Holanda y muchas gracias pues a las personas que nos permitieron compartir con él este espacio y también a Hugo por también compartir este buen momento. Muchísimas gracias y la idea es que saquemos el mejor provecho. Y bueno, esto es un hito porque estamos empezando la parte de internacionalización de manera más frecuente. Entonces, los jueves farmacéuticos no solamente son farmacéuticos de Colombia, sino también hemos tenido de otros países y qué bueno que no perdamos esa buena costumbre. También a ti, Yasmín, muchas gracias. A Carolina Gómez también que nos acompaña y que permitió también que pudiéramos tener esta buena oportunidad de compartir con el colega. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Federman. Y efectivamente a nuestro jueves farmacéutico asisten colegas de diferentes lugares del mundo y también han participado como conferencistas de países como Argentina, Guatemala, Perú. Y ahorita pues tenemos de Holanda, un holandés cuyo nombre es Hugo van der Kuy, que nos va a acompañar con la charla Tácticas holandesas para fortalecer la posición del farmacéutico hospitalario. Hugo es farmacéutico clínico con amplia trayectoria en farmacia hospitalaria, investigación clínica, educación médica y oncología. Es doctor en farmacia por la Universidad de Leiden. Actualmente se desempeña como profesor y director del Departamento de Farmacia Clínica en el Hospital Erasmo en Metz, donde lidera iniciativas de innovación farmacéutica y producción a pequeña escala de medicamentos biotecnológicos. Es un reconocido investigador científico farmacéutico con un enfoque académico, tiene una gran capacidad de gestión y contribución al avance de la farmacia clínica en contextos hospitalarios y académicos. Todo un lujo, un placer contar con Hugo esta noche acá. Pueden escribir sus preguntas en el chat y las vamos a ir respondiendo al finalizar la presentación de Hugo. Cuenten con ello. Y bueno, Hugo, pues sin más preámbulos, bienvenidos a tus jueves farmacéutico. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Adelante.
Um, Gracias por la invitación. En primer lugar, quiero disculparme porque mi nivel de español no es suficiente para contar esta historia en su lengua materna. Para facilitarles a ustedes y dificultarme a mí, he preparado muchas diapositivas en español. Espero que sea una sesión interactiva. Así que si tiene preguntas, por favor, interrumparme. Thank you very much. I'll start to share my slide.
Gracias, Hugo, por ese esfuerzo, muy hermoso detalle de tu parte. Por favor, a todos los que estén ingresando a la sala, recuerden que pueden seleccionar el nivel de interpretación en la opción de lenguajes. Pueden escoger el idioma en el que se sientan más cómodos, ¿sí? Ustedes ven que ahí dice more, ahí está el circulito con los tres punticos, lo despliegan y encuentran interpretación. Y ahí pueden seleccionar el idioma en el que deseen escuchar la charla. Esta noche tenemos servicio de traducción simultánea gracias al apoyo del colegio. Entonces, Ahora sí, Hugo, ¿puedes compartir pantalla?
Muchas gracias. If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. Thank you for the possibility to have this presentation. I would like to thank you all for the attention you're giving me. Gracias. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you tonight. And please keep in mind that all I say comes from a good heart. I'm here to help you, to help the pharmacists in Colombia. I'm here to help the healthcare system in Colombia and to give you some advice. So if I give advice, I'm not trying to be an arrogant pharmacist. I do it with all the love I have from my good heart. What you also realize is that my opinion is just an opinion. And sometimes I make mistakes. Sometimes I have a wrong opinion. And I would like to have the discussion with you to change my mind. First, and it's an important thing for me to say, I don't have any conflicts of interest. I do not have any relationship with the pharmaceutical industry, nor am I a shareholder of any pharmaceutical industry or any other company. And for me, that's important to say because it means that I can make decisions without being conflicted, having relationships with the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a hospital pharmacist, and I'm also trained to be a clinical pharmacologist. That's an extra year you have to do in the Netherlands, in which you study how drugs are behaving in men. I'm, I'm also the head of the clinical pharmacy at Erasmus MC, and Erasmus MC is the biggest university hospital we have in the Netherlands, Pesos Bajos. And I'm also at that university the professor of clinical pharmacy. One of my the motto I have is one day without change is a day that you didn't live. So I think we should be changing each day something, and we should keep on changing continuously to improve the care we are giving, or also more on the personally base to change your life. And and also an important message I would like to give to you, and that's my vision, is that you can be, we all, but you can be the change in the world you want to see. And that's important. So if we want to change something, don't look at other people, how they can help you, but start by being the change you want to see in the world. Why is it important to have a strong pharmacist? I think it's important to have a strong pharmacist in the hospital, but also in the community pharmacy, because both the hospital, the healthcare system, and especially, and probably the most important thing, patients are benefiting from it. And I have shown here two of many important articles in which it's shown that a clinical pharmacist, a strong position of a clinical pharmacist, reduces mortality. And these are only two of a large amount of articles showing the same message. Is this talk only relevant for hospital pharmacists? No. We can also have a lot of articles about community pharmacy. So also in the community pharmacy, it's important that we have a strong position of pharmacists. And I just have shown you the titles of the articles, but what's in the articles I would like to show you as well. Sorry, this slide isn't translated in Spanish yet. So the first article that I showed you was a meta-analysis of 14 studies in which they look at pharmacists who are being part of the intensive care unit team and where they are taking their role. And what you see in those meta-analysis of 14 studies is that if pharmacists are being present in the intensive care unit team, and if they take their role, that leads to a reduction in mortality of 22%. And that's enormous. To be honest, if we had to register this as a drug, there wouldn't be a problem. It would have been registered without any problems. Apart from the reduction in mortality, the involvement of the clinical pharmacist in the intensive care unit team also resulted in shorter intensive care unit stays and less medication errors. The second article I showed you was a large-scale analysis involving almost 3 million patients across approximately almost 900 hospitals in the United States. And what they did, they looked at 7 clinical pharmacy services. And where do you have to think of then at that moment? A clinical pharmacy service is, for example, a medication review, adverse drug reactions management, participation in the multidisciplinary teams. I have to do something with my screen. Yes, because otherwise I don't see the whole slide. Sorry. Adverse drug reaction management, but also, for example, participation in the coding teams or helping the physicians to get the medication history straight from the start at admission. And each clinical pharmacy service was associated with thousands of prevented deaths per service. So also in this article, it's clearly shown that if you have a strong position of the pharmacy, a strong position of the hospital pharmacist, the hospital will benefit from it, the physicians will benefit from it, and most importantly, the patients will benefit from it. Is this only important for hospital pharmacies? I, Roberto, can you be muted, please? Is this talk only relevant for hospital pharmacies? No. I addressed this already shortly. Also for community pharmacy, it's important that pharmacists are taking their role and have a strong position. And if I'm talking about a strong position, it also means that you feel yourself a peer from the physicians, that you are treated equally, that you have a discussion with the physicians, and that you are treated equally and there is no gap. I'll get back to this. In the community pharmacy, and this is a study from Canada with older patients, it has shown that the 30-day mortality decreased from 2.1% to 1.7% if you do a medication review and also an adherence check, so to check whether they are using their medication. And that medication review and that adherence check is performed by the community pharmacy. And here also, you see a reduction of approximately 20%. 20% reduction in the 30 days mortality. And that's very important. A smaller decline, but also statistically relevant, was that the hospital readmissions also declined. But I think the main message from this is that the 30-day mortality decreased. So the main message from this slide is that my talk is not only focusing on hospital pharmacies, but also this is also important for community pharmacists. And I will focus in the rest of my talk on hospital pharmacists, but please keep in mind that the same story goes for the community pharmacies. Why is it important to strengthen the position of the pharmacy, of the pharmacist? I think it's important because a pharmacist can play a role in at least 5 fields that are listed here. And now I see that I've only translated the title of the slide. Sorry. So a strong position of the hospital pharmacist will lead to a better medication safety and therapy optimization. Pharmacists should prevent medication errors. We should manage, think about interactions, check all the doses that should be given, adapt dosing if it's necessary, and altogether make sure we have a safe and very effective patient care. But apart from effective patient care, it's also very important that we pay attention to the financial part of it. And that's the cost-effective medication use. So we shouldn't be using drugs that are not very effective. We should take cost also as part of the one of the parameters to choose which drug should be used without compromising quality. However, and that's something that's different in the Netherlands than here in Colombia. In the Netherlands, the use of generic drug is almost more than 90%. So if generic drugs are available, all the doctors are obliged to prescribe in the generic names. Because in my opinion, you're not compromising quality, but you are looking at cost effectiveness at that moment. And why is that important? Because we have to support efficient use of healthcare resources. Even in the Netherlands, which is a relatively rich country, certainly compared to Colombia, we have healthcare budget problems. And I was told that we have the same problems here at Colombia. And those problems are going to increase if the population is growing older. And the mean age of the population is increasing. The third objective is that we should take our role in interprofessional collaboration and education. So we can teach, for example, nurses, but also physicians. We should enhance team-based care, and we can provide education about medication to all kind of professionals. And when I say all kind of professionals, it's interesting that in the Netherlands we are also looking more and more at physiotherapists. They are often a group that's neglected, but they also treat a lot of patients that are using medication, and we're never giving them the proper education about medication. The fourth topic in which the pharmacist should take his or her position is guideline development. And not only guideline development, but also helping professionals, and most of the times they are physicians, help them to adhere to the guidelines. So not only create and implement it, but also make sure the physicians are adhering to the guidelines. And those guidelines are, of course, based on evidence-based guidelines, on evidence-based treatments, and not, which is also happening in the Netherlands, that you develop guidelines because you have a good relationship with certain pharmaceutical industries. In the Netherlands, the pharmacists take also their responsibility for innovation and quality improvement. And we are driving innovations like clinical decision support systems. A clinical decision support system, because if we have the normal medication surveillance, it's medication A that you compare with medication B. If you are trying to develop a clinical decision support system, you can introduce much more parameters, such as the age, the kidney function, and also the use of more than 2 or 3 drugs. And of course, in the Netherlands, pharmacists are taking their responsibility in developing more and more personalized medicine. So these are the 5 areas in which the pharmaceutical advisor, the pharmacist, can take and should take his position. For me, it was interesting to see where is exactly the difference between the pharmacist in the Netherlands and pharmacist in Colombia? And what I did is I asked ChatGTP to make a comparison for those two countries for the pharmacist on a few topics. So the next slide I will present is not my personal opinion, but it is the opinion of ChatGTP. So if you don't agree with it, don't blame me, blame ChatGTP. However, to be honest, with the limited experience I have here at Columbia, I have been here at Columbia now for working at a hospital at Columbia now for 5, 6 weeks. I must say, I agree with the results ChatGTP is showing me. Oh, sorry, there was one slide in between. I've changed my... So, my experience here at Columbia, so the slide from JetCTP will be the next slide. Sorry. My experience in Colombia, and I was a bit surprised, is that there is a huge gap in status between the physician, for example, the oncologist, and the pharmacist. I had a conversation with an oncologist and I asked him, he showed me a room and he very proudly said, each day we have a meeting here in which we discuss, all oncologists discuss all the difficult patients. And then I asked, is there also a pharmacist present? And then he looked at me and then he said, a pharmacist? A pharmacist is an administrative function. So they are not...
Farmacéutico, Hugo, disculpa. Santiago, la palabra correcta es farmacéutico.
Okay, that's a translation
Because
then. So I'll use the word pharmacist. So I was telling him that in the Netherlands, if we have those meetings, there's always a pharmacist available. What I realize is that I am talking with a limited experience. I am here only for 6 weeks in Colombia. I've only been talking to a limited number of physicians. But when I share my ideas that there is a huge gap between the status of the physician and the status of the pharmacist, most of the people I talk with acknowledge that gap. And that ensured me, that made me also eager to work on that gap. And I will get back to that later. Here you see the situation in the Netherlands. What you see in this slide is we have the hospital pharmacist, we have the medical specialist, for example, the oncologist. We have the chemico-clinico, that's translated, that should be the clinical chemistry lab. So I don't know whether it's translated correctly in Spanish, but it's the clinical chemistry lab. And we have here a clinical physics. And what we did is we compared on several parameters how the four jobs compared. And what you see is that on all the topics, the hospital pharmacist is comparable to the oncologist. When we're talking about, I'll take my Dutch slide. Oh yeah, when we're talking about how long the education takes, how long the specialization takes, whether you are registered in the law, whether you are have a specialization which is recognized by a Dutch law, whether you have a person who is always on guard, whether during the weekends there has to be someone in the hospital available, whether you have a responsibility to the inspectorate, so this is the Dutch inspectorate, and whether there is a disciplinary system in which you can be, if you don't treat patients correct, you can get a punishment. So on all these topics, the hospital pharmacist in the Netherlands compares with the oncologist or another physician in the hospitals. And the other two jobs don't. There are differences. So I showed this slide because we are also trying to get the same salary as the physicians. This is what I am doing at this moment also in the Netherlands. But apart from the salary, it demonstrates that the hospital pharmacist is seen as a peer with the specialist. And I would love that we create a stronger position for the hospital pharmacist here in Colombia to decrease the gap between the physician and the hospital pharmacist. And in my ultimate dream, that the hospital pharmacist will be seen as a peer by the physician as well as they do in the Netherlands. If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. And we can't realize this within 1 or 2 years. But I think, and I would love to think along with you, I think this is something we should work on and we should be able to establish within 10 years. What I did over here in this slide, and this is a slide I mentioned before. This is a slide that's made by JetGTP. And what you see is the circle is round. And if you are on this part of the circle, if you are at the line of the circle, you do 100%. And here in orange, you see the results from the Netherlands, Países Bajos, and in red, it's Colombia. And here you can see that on the parameters I was looking at, for example, the reconciliation of medication. So are we helping the physicians? Are we taking our role to put in the system all the medical history the patient is using, which kind of drugs, when someone is admitted to the hospital? In Netherlands, that's almost 100%, while in Colombia, this is limited. The role we take in the Netherlands, the clinical role we take in the Netherlands is almost 100%. Here in Colombia, it's still limited. We are fully integrated in the hospital as being part of the medical teams, on the ICU, on the oncology department, but also on the neonatal intensive care unit, the NICU. Here in Colombia, it's less. Are we taking our responsibility in innovation in clinics? Here, and that's interesting as well, the salary is also different. And that's also something we should work on, could work on. But the salary also reflects on the responsibility you have and the responsibility you take. Then the right to prescribe. That's something which in the Netherlands is almost on half. So that differs a little bit from each hospital. I know that here at Erasmus, and I'm more flexible in it, we are taking sometimes, we are prescribing drugs, but in the Netherlands, it's still something that should be developed further. That's what you see here in this line. But in Colombia, it's still limited. What I think is very interesting, and that's something you should take into account, is does it, this difference in status, this difference in taking your role, does it have to do with the, the level of education? And if I believe ChatGTP, the difference between the education level of the Dutch pharmacist compared to the Colombian pharmacist, hospital pharmacist, isn't as huge as the status would predict. So that makes me wonder, why is the hospital pharmacist on a lot of fields in the Netherlands more developed, taking more responsibility, because it has nothing to do, well, it might, but it's limited with the level of education. Here you see the, this is another way of putting the same figure. One moment. What I've shown in this figure is from the mean hospital pharmacist. What are his or her tasks during the day? And here you see for the Netherlands, Pesos Bajos, what they are doing during the day. And here you see, for example, more than 25, almost 30% of the time, they are in the clinic to discuss which kind of medication should be used by patients. We are also busy with preparations. Preparations we make in the pharmacy, or preparations that are made by people from the pharmacy at the department, at the local ward, sorry, at the local ward, or even when we are advising nurses how to prepare certain drugs. We are busy with the reconciliation of the drug history of patients. We are well, doing other things to promote rational use of drugs. Here in Colombia, you see the difference that, for example, the most important thing from the hospital pharmacist here at Colombia is logistics and a little bit pharmacoeconomia. In the Netherlands, the logistics part is limited to, let's say, 10% or less. So this also illustrates that there is a difference in the things we are doing. when I was preparing this talk, I thought, well, maybe the position of the pharmacist um, might also be part of whether you are acknowledged as a specialist in the law or by the government or not. And here I have asked ChatGPT once more to make a drawing from Europe, the continent of America and Africa, and to show in which countries the hospital pharmacist is acknowledged by the law, by the government, as a specialist. And in green, you see the countries where it is, and in red, you see the countries where it isn't. So, looking at this slide, I realized, preparing this talk, that in the long term, I think it's important. Actually, I don't understand this picture completely. There is something wrong with America, to be honest. But this also shows that in the long term, we should be talking in Colombia with the government whether the hospital pharmacist and the community pharmacist, because my talk is also reflecting on the community pharmacist, whether the hospital pharmacist and community pharmacist should be acknowledged as a specialism. However, to get that acknowledgement from the government, first you need to prove it. And to get that acknowledgement, I must say in the Netherlands, that took more than 10 or 15 years. So that's the long-term goal we are looking at, not the short term. And I think it's important that we we should start with small steps. We should start with small improvements which are readily easy to implement. And then if we have shown that we need that position, that we deserve that position to be equal to the physicians, then we should go for acknowledgement by the government. This slide isn't for me translated in English, so here I have another problem. There are 5 qualities that are necessary to increase the position of the hospital pharmacy. And these are things that also, apart from having the education, I think it's also important that the character from the person counts. So we need people who take initiatives. We need people who have a vision. We need people who are thinking, what should we do within 2 or 3 years? And not thinking about the problem we're having today in the pharmacy. We need people who have a very clear way of communication, that they can pursue, that they can have discussions with physicians, that they can have discussions with nurses, that they can have discussions with directors of the hospital pharmacists. So they should be very readily, they should be very good equipped in their communication. And they should combine that with a very good clinical education. They should be very well equipped if we're talking about pharmacotherapy. They should know everything about the security for patients. And they should be having a kind of credibility. So people should believe them. On the other hand, they should be also, and now we're talking about four, they should be people that are relatively easy to cooperate with other disciplinaries, that are relatively easy to cooperate with different people. And sometimes, and I say that from my own experience, with difficult people. I've met a lot of oncologists, cardiologists that weren't very easy to cooperate with. And then most of the times it needs the pharmacist to be very flexible, to adapt himself without losing your own identity. That's important, but that you can adapt a little bit to cooperate with them. And we need people who are willing to innovate and introduce on evidence-based data new technologies. And what we're looking for, if you make a list of this, there is still one missing. And when I made this list, I've asked ChatGPT to make a infographic from it. And here I've forgotten the name of the animal, but here this means the capacity to adapt according to the situation. It allows you to also cooperate with difficult people. And when I was asking ChatGPT to make an infographic, I asked also ChatGPT to add one extra character parameter. And that's listed here underneath. We need people that have the courage to disagree. We need people that have the courage to stand up and fight. Fight for our rights. And I've forgotten the name, but I think it's also the text of a song. Stand up and fight for your right. I thought it was someone from Jamaica who sang.
Bob Marley.
Bob Marley. Thank you very much, Bob Marley. So, and I really believe that we need people with the 5 characters I just discussed in the slide before, but also people who are willing to take risks, who are willing to go into the discussion, who are willing to prepare for the fight, who are willing to take the position we, as pharmacists, need to take to improve the situation in the hospital, to improve the situation for our patients, to improve healthcare in general. Final remarks. So, in my opinion, apart from education, character is a very important issue as well. We should leave behind the idea that as a pharmacist, we don't have the same status as a physician. I think we deserve another status. I think we should work on being peers, being equal, with physicians. What I experienced the last weeks I've been here at Colombia is that I would love to help here in Colombia, but the language barrier is a challenge. And it's interesting, but most doctors I've been talking to, most physicians I've been talking to, they speak English. However, I've met a lot of pharmacists who don't speak English. And I think it illustrates and it's a barrier for me, it's a challenge to help you to work on the position of the clinical pharmacy. I would like to cooperate with you to work on the position of the hospital pharmacist, especially, and also the community pharmacist here in Colombia. I would love to think along with you and to advise you. So if you have any ideas how we can improve the position of the hospital pharmacist or the pharmacist in general, please connect to me on LinkedIn and I will respond to you. And you can find me on LinkedIn with Hugo Vanderkue. And I think there is only one on LinkedIn with this name. To summarize, I'll stop sharing. Give me one moment. To summarize, I've tried to show in this presentation that there are some examples in the world in which the hospital pharmacist has an equal status to the physician. I've tried to summarize in this presentation that both the hospital, the physicians, the patients, and healthcare in general will benefit from a strong position of the pharmacist. In this presentation, I've tried to illustrate where, and I'm saying we in Colombia, because I feel also a little bit part of Colombia after being here for several weeks. I think how we in Colombia should, where we have a gap with pharmacists, for example, in the Netherlands, and where we should work on. And finally, I will repeat my offer, and I'm also thinking along with, for example, Carolina Gomez and someone from the Dutch embassy, Marta Aravalo. We are thinking, the three of us, how we can strengthen the position of the hospital pharmacist here at Columbia. And we would love to hear your ideas. Thank you very much for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Muchas gracias, Hugo. Interesante conferencia y sobre todo muy pertinente para denotar que a nivel de formación, de cualificación, el farmacéutico tiene pues un lugar muy importante que cumplir a nivel de la sociedad, en el bienestar de toda la población. Y bueno, particularmente no veo preguntas en estos momentos acá en el chat interno. Ya me van a decir si en YouTube tenemos alguna. Te quiero formular la siguiente, ¿sí? ¿Cuál creerías tú que sería la mejor herramienta que podría hacer nuestra organización gremial, el Colegio Nacional de Químicos Farmacéuticos, para fortalecer el papel del farmacéutico en el país?
Yes, that's a very good question. And if I would have the answer, I would have started already here at Columbia. So that's something we are thinking about. So the plan is, I think, we should work on several fields, on several parameters. And I think one of them is that we should have some pharmacists that have examples. No, that we should work on some examples of pharmacists that they can see, for example, in other countries, what the role of the pharmacist can be. So we are thinking of sending some pharmacists to other countries, for example, in Spain, and everyone is welcome in the Netherlands as well, to show what the role can be. And then most of the time I'm focusing, I think, on taking your clinical role. And taking your clinical role is having the discussions with the physicians, about which medication to choose, about which medication to prescribe. In my opinion, each physician is obliged to prescribe in generic names, and it is the pharmacist who decides what he is going to deliver, what he is going to dispense, whether it's an originator, whether it's a biosimilar, or whether it's a generic. And that's not the role of the physician. At the same time, I think we should take our role in talking with the patients, in putting the medical history of the patients already relatively ready in the computer system. So I think we should focus on working on clinical things. And I like to exaggerate a little bit and to put a firm statement just to have the discussion. But other people are more trained in logistics than pharmacists. So we should focus on other tasks than logistics. We should focus, and then I want to mention two things, on pharmacotherapy, use our knowledge in the clinic, helping the physician, helping the nurse. And another important thing, and that's something we are forgetting in the Netherlands, is that as pharmacists, we have the right to produce our own medication. And that's something in the Netherlands, we are losing knowledge on that topic, while that topic is also very important. So these are the two main areas we have to keep on working. Is that answering your question a little bit, Jasmine?
Un poco. Un poco porque el reto es bastante fuerte, máximo cuando necesitamos tener balance. Yo lo llamo así en temas de lo que tiene que ver los diferentes roles que puede ejercer el químico farmacéutico. Nosotros podemos estar en la parte asistencial, en la parte industrial, ¿sí? Investigación, desarrollo en diferentes áreas, pero sí sentimos que en Colombia necesitamos fortalecer el papel del farmacéutico hospitalario y sobre todo desarrollar la farmacia comunitaria. A eso viene la siguiente pregunta, Hugo. Sí. En la experticia que vos tenés en, en Holanda, ¿cuál es el esquema de la práctica de la farmacia comunitaria? ¿Cómo la han implementado?
Yes. I've tried to understand how it's organized here in Colombia. And what I realize is in Colombia, you have a lot of drugstores. And we don't have them in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, you have a drogery, but in a drogery, they're not allowed to sell licensed drugs. So drugs that should be prescribed by physicians, you can't get them from a drogery or a drugstore. So in the Netherlands, you have pharmacies, and it's obligatory to have in each pharmacy at least one pharmacist. It's not obliged to be continuously there. So it's not that if he is on lunch that the pharmacy has to close, but more than 80% of the time, the pharmacist should be around. And to be honest, I think that most pharmacies, most community pharmacies in the Netherlands have 2 or 3 pharmacists continuously available. And what you see is that they are taking roles such as medication reviews and medication adherence conversations with patients. So they are really putting a lot of effort on promoting a safe and efficacious drug use in the community pharmacy. Yeah. So it's a different system, and therefore maybe that's also the reason in my talk why I focused on the hospital pharmacist, because well, it's closer to my position, it's closer to my job, and it's also perhaps easier to start the change you want to see. So this is my answer.
Bueno, a ver, ¿hay alguna pregunta de los colegas que están acá en sala? Ferman. No, no hay más preguntas. De mi parte, te dejo hasta acá. Federman, ¿está por ahí?
No, no, señora, está desconectado.
No escucho nada.
Okay, maybe then I can give a last remark.
Está,
I would
está
like to thank
desconectado.
once more everyone
Bueno,
for the attention, and I would like to repeat my invitation that if you want to think along with us how to improve the position of the pharmacist in Colombia, please connect to me on LinkedIn. Please try to find me on LinkedIn. Thank you. Buenas noches.
Muchísimas gracias, Hugo. Un placer haberte tenido esta noche acá en los Jueves Farmacéuticos. Muy amable y bueno, muchas gracias a los colegas que se conectaron a sala, los que se conectaron en YouTube. Desde la Regional Valle tomamos la decisión de hacer la premiación del logo y el eslogan para el Congreso Nacional de Ciencias Farmacéuticas 2027 en Cali el próximo jueves, donde además vamos a tener la rifa de 5 inscripciones al Congreso de Atención Farmacéutica. Vamos a hacer el lanzamiento del Congreso. Entonces, vamos a dejar hasta acá. Hola, Dave, vamos a dejar hasta acá. Sí, y lo hacemos mejor la próxima semana, la premiación. ¿De acuerdo? Entonces, muchísimas gracias a todos por acompañarnos esta noche. Y, acá hay una última pregunta, Hugo, te aprovecho. ¿Sí?
Of
Ok.
course, naturally.
Dice por acá un colega que si has tenido la oportunidad de comparar los planes de estudios de carreras de farmacia de Colombia versus Holanda y si es posible hacer trabajos de investigaciones eh, contigo en colaboración.
Well, maybe the second question is the most easiest question. Yes, I'd love to cooperate on research. So we're doing a lot of research. I would love to elaborate on that once in a different time, but we are doing a lot of research. And if you go for the first question, I didn't compare it yet, but it will be on our list to make a comparison between the education to become a pharmacist at Colombia, also compared to the Netherlands. Um, yeah, so we haven't done it yet, but it's certainly important. If we want to strengthen the position, we also need to compare the educations. It's a correct question. It's a very important question. And it's perhaps it's also good to say that at this moment, so we are thinking of making a project to strengthen the position of the pharmacists here in Colombia, and that will take. We're trying to develop a process now of more than 4 years, so it won't be something we will realize in a few months or next year.
Bueno, por acá están solicitando tu contacto, Hugo. El colega Donaldo de la Hoz, que es el coordinador de la sala especializada de resistencia antimicrobiana del Colegio Nacional, está preguntando cómo te pueden contactar para hacer pues, posibles proyectos de colaboración en investigaciones.
Yeah, I prefer to be contacted on LinkedIn. So if I don't know whether you have LinkedIn, otherwise I should give you my email address. But for me, the easiest way to connect is LinkedIn. I'll show my email address.
Ok,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then I have to share once more the slides. One moment. My email address, I will type it in here, is so here you can see my email address. So maybe I can keep it here for a moment. But once more, the most easiest way is to connect to me on LinkedIn. One of the problems is that my email box is sometimes exploding.
Ok. Muy bien. Entonces, Federman ahora sí está por ahí para que haga el cierre. Y bueno, de mi parte, muchísimas gracias, Hugo. Excelente, muy chévere escuchar tu experiencia y conocimiento en este tema. Federman, ¿sí? Bueno, entonces, pues no siendo más, Hugo, namaste. Muchas gracias. Nos vemos el próximo jueves farmacéutico, todos los colegas. Vamos a tener un evento muy especial, vamos a tener una charla sobre productos biológicos y luego vamos a hacer la rifa de unas inscripciones con el lanzamiento del Congreso de Atención Farmacéutica y la premiación del el concurso de logos y lemas. Ahí está ya el flyer. Esa es el próximo jueves, la conferencia que vamos a tener sobre seguridad de inmunoglobulina G en pacientes atendidos en una IPS de alta complejidad, el lanzamiento del congreso, la rifa y la premiación. Entonces, no se pierdan el próximo jueves farmacéutico. Muchas gracias a todos, los esperamos.
Yasmín,
Hugo, un
Yasmín,
abrazo. Ah, Federman,
Yasmín,
dale.
es que no había podido hablar porque no, el anfitrión no me permitía hablar.
Perdón.
Bueno,
Hágale.
muchas gracias. Hugo, thank you so much for attending our meeting and welcome to Colombia. For us, it's very important your ideas, your support. Thank you so much. Para todos, muchas gracias. Recuerden, los esperamos en nuestro 13º Congreso de Ciencias Farmacéuticas. Estamos a muy pocos días. De verdad que la agenda, los conferencistas y por supuesto la oportunidad de encontrarnos va a ser muy, muy importante. Así es que los esperamos y Yasmin, como siempre, muchas gracias por este gran esfuerzo que haces en los jueves farmacéuticos y a todos los presentes por dedicar un espacio de su tiempo a compartir y escuchar estas sugerencias y opciones que nos dan nuestros colegas. Muchas gracias y les deseo una buena noche. Hugo, have a nice night. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Ay, muchas gracias. Feliz noche para todos,
Ya,
señora.
así que no me abre. No, mentira, ya tengo eso, pero quería que lo vieras. Un minutico.